Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War, Behind the Battles, Part 2, Abraham Lincoln.
Part 2.
Part 1 was all about his early years growing up and getting into lawyerism.
Getting to duels.
And getting into duels, and, well, a duel, and his first foray into politics. And that's where, we're going to pick up in the 1850s. The talk of slavery is picking up. We already know.
It's already abolished for new slaves.
Old Abe's opposed to the spread of slavery, which
Past the old Mississippi.
a lot of these Northerners are, but he's got a foe that's about to be coming upon him, as in Stephen A. Douglas is going to be his political rival for the next decade or so before his actual rise to presidency. We're going to take a look at the 50s through up until the election of 1860 before next week's episode, where we'll take a look at his actual presidency, which obviously covers the Civil War. We're not going to get too in depth on the Civil War stuff, because obviously we just did 200 and something or 200 episodes on the Civil War. So,
Right.
Like I said, the debate over the status of slavery in the territories exacerbated sectional tensions between the slave-hoven South and the North, and the Compromise of 1850 failed to diffuse the issue.
Sure did. There wasn't even a compromise. I don't even know what they called it.
Package of 5 separate bills passed by the United States Congress in September 1850 that temporarily diffused tensions. Oh, you lied. Centered on how to handle slavery in recently acquired territories.
Yeah.
Approved California's request to enter the Union as a free state. Strengthened fugitive slave laws with the Fugitive Slave Act. Right. And then all that stuff, basically.
Planned slave trade in Washington, D.C., while still allowing slavery itself there. Yeah. You just can't trade them anymore. Just what you have is what you got until they run out.
Or you can bring them.
No, you can't even bring them across the ocean anymore.
No, but you can bring them from
Right.
other
From
territories. You
inside
just
the
can't slave trade.
Right.
Well, they defined the northern and western borders for Texas while establishing a territorial government for the territory of New Mexico, with no restrictions on whether any future state from this territory would be free or slave territory.
Damn, Texas was, Oklahoma was part of Texas?
It was way up there, man.
Look at that shit.
And they also established a territorial government for the territory of Utah with no restrictions on whether it would be free or a slave state. So basically,
that tells you right there that
they didn't know what the hell they were doing, first of all.
right, and the North didn't give two shits about slavery, because if they did, all of those would have been slave-free states.
I think it was just a not even, I guess, a compromise.
Right.
But what did it do? Didn't anything. The South got the better end of the stick there.
Looked like it.
Or whoever's going to occupy that territory.
Yeah.
But in the early 1850s, Lincoln supported efforts for sectional mediation, and his 1852 eulogy for Henry Clay focused on the latter's support for gradual emancipation and opposition to both extremes on the slavery issue.
Yeah.
So, can't sell them, but we can't ban them, basically.
Right, we're going to weed them out.
As the 1850s progressed, the debate over slavery in the Nebraska Territory and Kansas Territory became a particularly acrimonious, and Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois proposed popular sovereignty as a compromise measure.
Oh.
The proposal would take the issue of slavery out of the hands of Congress by allowing the electorate of each territory to decide what they want to do.
Which they should have done in the first place, I guess. I mean, not really. I guess slavery should be like a main thing.
Yeah, it probably should be a federal issue.
Right, yeah, it's a world issue.
Right.
The proposal alarmed many Northerners who hoped to stop the spread of slavery into territories.
Stop the spread.
Despite this Northern opposition, Douglas's Kansas-Nebraska Act narrowly passed through Congress in May of 1854.
Let me guess. It said that they can do what they want, basically.
Right. For months after its passage, Old Abe did not publicly comment on the Kansas-Nebraska Act, but he came to strongly oppose it. 16th October, 1854. In his Peoria speech, Lincoln declared his opposition to slavery, which he repeated en route to the presidency. Speaking in his Kentucky accent with a very powerful voice, he said the Kansas Act had a declared indifference, but as I must think, a covert real zeal for the spread of slavery. I cannot but hate it. I hate it because of the monstrous injustice of slavery itself. I hate it because it deprives our Republican example of its just influence in the world. Lincoln's attack on the Kansas-Nebraska Act marked his return to political life. And brought him back. He's like, oh shit, look at me. Nationally, the Whigs were irreparably split by the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And
It was like we said before, they have the new guard and the old guard. It's kind of like the mafia, the mustache Pete's versus the new guys.
Exactly. And other efforts to compromise on slavery issues as well. They were not even seen eye to
Cannot
eye.
come together on that.
Reflecting the demise of his party, Lincoln would write in 1855, I think I'm a Whig, but others say there are no Whigs and that I am an abolitionist. I do no more than oppose the extension of slavery.
The extension of slavery,
Right.
not the abolition of
what
slavery.
that's everybody always thought.
Drawn on the anti-slavery portion of the Whig Party and combining Free Soil, Liberty, and anti-slavery Democratic Party members, the new Republican Party formed as a Northern party dedicated to anti-slavery.
Look at that shit.
Lincoln resisted early attempts to recruit him to the new party, fearing that it would serve as a platform for extreme abolitionists.
It did.
Yeah. Lincoln also hoped to rejuvenate the ailing Whig Party, though he bemoaned his party's growing closeness with the nativist Know-Nothing movement. Yeah, I mean, there's so many right now.
Right.
Well, back in this day, at all the 1700s throughout early 1900s, there's so many freaking parties that were like big parties.
The Whigs. Yeah, the Whigs.
There wasn't just two-party. It wasn't
Right.
just a two-party thing.
No.
Like, literally.
It's insane. And then you got this Republican Party that nobody knows anything about. All they know is they don't want
They don't want slaves.
slaves.
Pretty much.
Crazy that it all worked out.
Well,
Kind of. 1854 elections. Lincoln elected to Illinois legislator, but declined to take his seat. In the aftermath of the elections, which showed the power and popularity of the movement opposed to the Kansas and Nebraska Act, Lincoln, he said, you know what? I'm going to go to the United States Senate. I don't want that legislator seat in Illinois anymore. I want to go to D.C.
well, we already know that he wants to further his political career, so of course he's going to go to the Senate.
Right. At that very time, senators were elected by the state legislature.
When's the last time has anybody been president with just being a House representative? Doubtful.
After leading in the first 6 rounds of voting, but unable to obtain a majority, Lincoln instructed his backers to vote for Lyman Trumbull. He's like, all right, if you guys ain't gonna vote, if I don't get enough votes, this guy's got to go.
Well, he was an anti-slavery Democrat and had received few votes in the earlier ballots. His supporters, also anti-slavery Democrats, had vowed not to support any Whig.
Oh,
Lincoln's decision to withdraw enabled his Whig supporters and Trumbull's anti-slavery Democrats to combine forces and defeat the mainstream Democratic candidate Joel Aldrich Madison, in part due to the ongoing violent political confrontations in the Kansas. Opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act remained strong in Illinois and throughout the North.
Yeah.
Well, of course it would.
all right. As the 1856 elections approached, Abe abandoned the defunct Whig Party in favor for the Republicans. He attended the May of 1856 Bloomington Convention, which formally established the Illinois Republican Party. The convention platform asserted that Congress had the right to regulate slavery in the territories and called for the immediate admission of Kansas as a free state once and for all. Just do it. Lincoln gave the final speech of the convention, in which he endorsed the party platform and called for the preservation of the Union, because we must keep the Union together.
At the June 1856 Republican National Convention, Lincoln received significant support on the vice presidential ballot, though the party nominated a ticket of John C. Fremont and William Dayton. Lincoln strongly supported the Republican ticket, campaigning for the party throughout Illinois. Democrats nominated former Ambassador James Buchanan, who had been out of the country since 1853 and thus had avoided the debate over slavery in the territories.
Oh, shit.
While the Know-Nothings nominated former Whig President Millard Fillmore.
Right.
In the 56 elections, Buchanan defeated both his challengers, but Fremont won several northern states. And Republican William Henry Bissell, he won election as governor of Illinois.
Wow.
Though Lincoln did not himself win office, his vigorous campaigning had made him the leading Republican in Illinois. And they said, boys, guess who we're running in 1860, baby?
Eric Foner contrasts the abolitionists and anti-slavery radical Republicans of the Northeast who saw slavery as a sin with the conservative Republicans who thought it was bad because it hurt white people and blocked progress. He said that in 2010. Foner argues that Lincoln was a moderate in the middle, opposing slavery primarily because it violated Republican principles of the Founding Fathers, especially the equality of all men and the democratic self-government as expressed in the Declaration of Independence.
March 1857, the Supreme Court issued its decision in Dred Scott versus Sanford. The opinion by Chief Justice Roger Taney held that blacks were not citizens and derived no rights from the Constitution. Oh, wow. While many Democrats hoped that Dred Scott would end the dispute over slavery in the territories, the decision sparked further outrage in the North.
Sure in hell did.
Lincoln denounced the decision, alleging it was the product of a conspiracy of Democrats to support the slave power.
Makes sense.
That's crazy that the Supreme Court even was like, nah, these people aren't people.
No, right.
That's crazy.
Lincoln argued the authors of the Declaration of Independence never intended to say all were equal in color, size, intellect, moral developments, or social capacity, but they did consider all men created equal equal in certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So even Lincoln's saying, well, we're not equal in color and size and intellect. We might be smarter and
Somebody may be more rich, some are poor, some are this, some are that.
Right.
But guess what? We all have the right to live
exactly
free
free.
or die young. Douglas was up for re-election in 1858. That's Stephen Douglas. And Lincoln hoped to defeat the powerful Illinois Democrat, with the former Democrat Trumbull now serving as Republican senator.
Oh, wow.
Many in the party felt that a former Whig should be nominated in 1858. And Lincoln's 1856 campaigning and willingness to support Trumbull in 1854, he earned him the favor in the party.
Damn right it did.
Some Eastern Republicans favored the re-election of Douglas for the Senate in 1858, since he had led the opposition to the Lecompton Constitution, which would have admitted Kansas as a slave state.
Oh. But many Illinois Republicans resented this Eastern interference. There it is. For the very first time, Illinois Republicans held a convention to agree upon a Senate candidate. And old Abe, he won the party's Senate nomination with little opposition. Accepting the nomination, Lincoln delivered his House divided speech. He focused on Mark 3, verse 25 of the King James Bible. He says, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other."
It can't be both. The speech created an evocative image of the danger of disunion caused by the slavery debate,
Right.
and rallied Republicans across the North. The stage was then set for the campaign for statewide election of the Illinois legislature, which would in turn select either Lincoln or Douglas as its senator.
Right.
On being informed of Lincoln's nomination, Douglas stated, "He is the strong man of the party, and if I beat him, my victory will be hardly won."
Ooh, good for him, man. The Senate campaign featured the 7 Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858.
Yeah, those are famous.
The most famous political debates in American history.
Yeah, you know what? Every single one of those debates was like 4 hours long. It's
crazy.
Freaking retarded.
The principles stood in stark contrast, both physically and politically. Lincoln warned that the slave power was threatening the values of republicanism, and accused Douglas of distorting the values of the founding fathers that all men are created equal, while Douglas emphasized his Freeport doctrine that local settlers were free to choose whether to allow slavery or not, and accused Lincoln of having joined the abolitionists.
Oh. And that's one thing Lincoln doesn't want to be seen
Well,
as.
this is the thing here. People didn't want the government to get in all in the shit. That's why
They want to govern themselves.
Right.
States.
That's yeah.
States' rights.
But with the issue of owning human beings, I'm sorry, there's got to be a higher power there. Can't go with the states on that.
Oh, wow. That's a 180 turn from what you said on our very first episode of Battles of the American Civil
No.
War, when you said every state should have the power to do what they want.
Yes, every state should have the power, but except for owning human beings.
That's not what you said on our first episode.
It's totally different than owning human beings.
Just saying, you maybe doing this podcast and change your views a little bit.
I've always thought that.
No.
Yeah. I never said that the government shouldn't have to say if
Yes.
they're slaves or not.
Sure did.
No.
Yep. You said let the states decide what they want.
Yeah, but not about humans.
No, we were talking about slaves.
No.
Obviously.
Oh, I said what they just did with the compromise. You got what you got, but no new shit.
You get what you get, don't throw a fit.
Right. But the problem was this: what everybody didn't want the government to make decisions for, because at that time they didn't see themselves. They did as a country, but not really, man. When it takes 15 hours to go 3 miles, you feel like you're
Well, states were way more independent then.
Right.
There's a reason why Lee chose to side with Virginia.
right. He wasn't siding with Confederate states.
If Virginia was in the North or
He would've-
didn't secede, he would have been with the North.
Yes, that's exactly what he said. He's like, "Hey, I'm fighting for Virginia. I'm not fighting for
This is
the.
my motherland.
I'm not fighting for the Confederate states. I'm not fighting for the Union. I'm fighting for Virginia."
Right. Well, these debates had an atmosphere of a prize fight and drew crowds in the thousands.
Ooh, prize fight.
Oh, geez. Mad at Donald Trump back then.
Right.
Had the biggest crowds ever.
My biggest crowd, 1998
Douglas,
Lincoln.
he never seen crowds like this till I came. Lincoln, he stated Douglas's popular sovereignty theory was a threat to the nation's morality, and that Douglas represented a conspiracy to extend slavery to free states.
Ooh,
Douglas, he says Lincoln was defying the authority of the U.S. Supreme Court and the Dred Scott decision, which, if you remember, just last episode, Lincoln said, if the law is the law, you must follow it, but now he doesn't want to do it.
no.
Although the Republican legislative candidates won more popular votes, the Democrats won more seats, and the legislature reelected Douglas to the Senate.
Sure in hell did.
Despite the bitterness of the defeat for Lincoln, his articulation of the issues gave him a national political reputation.
Right. Who's this guy?
He was already well known in Illinois and the likes,
Right.
but now he's everywhere.
May 1859. Lincoln purchased the Illinois Staatsanzeiger, a German language newspaper, which was consistently supportive. Most of the state's 130,000 German Americans voted Democrat, but there was Republican support that the German language paper could mobilize.
Oh, look at him purchasing the whole newspaper to get his
Right.
bias across.
In the very aftermath of the 1858 elections, newspapers frequently mentioned Lincoln as a potential Republican presidential candidate in 1860. They also mentioned William Seward, Salmon Chase, Edward Bates, and Simon Cameron looming as rivals for the nomination against Lincoln. Boy.
While Lincoln was popular in the Midwest, he lacked support in the Northeast
Yeah.
and was unsure as to whether he should seek the presidency.
Right.
January 1860, Lincoln told a group of political allies that he would accept the nomination if offered, and in the following month, several local newspapers endorsed Lincoln for the president.
Oh, shit.
February 27th, 1860, New York party leaders invited Lincoln to give a speech at Cooper Union to a group of powerful Republicans.
I mean, if you're going to be a presidential candidate, you better come to New York and
yeah.
put your face in front of all these stupid people.
East Coast, obviously. I mean,
Right.
that's where the country is, basically.
Yeah.
Lincoln argued that the founding fathers had little use for popular sovereignty and had repeatedly sought to restrict slavery.
They have. That's true.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Every single founding father had about 50 slaves working on their farms.
Right. But they didn't want it to expand it
Well,
either.
that's a lie because it was still sold and thriving in the 1700s.
Sure no was. Lincoln, I know, even the British fucking abolished it first.
They were the first ones in the world.
Lincoln insisted that the moral foundation of the Republicans required opposition to slavery, rejected any groping for some middle ground between the right and the wrong. Despite his inelegant appearance, many in the audience thought him awkward and even ugly. Lincoln demonstrated an intellectual leadership that brought him into the front ranks of the party and into contention for the Republican presidential nomination.
Wasn't
Look at
aware-
that awkward, ugly son of a
Wasn't
bitch.
aware you had to be a 10-piece to be running for president.
You ain't getting a dime. Journalist Noah Brooks reported, no man ever before made such an impression on his first appeal to a New York audience.
I don't know why they would be speaking Southern when he's clearly New York, probably. Historian Donald.
Oh, shit.
The Donald guy. The three-named Donald guy.
Right.
He described the speech as a superb political move for an unannounced candidate to appear in one rival's,
That's a
who was
Seward.
Seward's own state, at an event sponsored by the second rival, who was Chase, his loyalist.
Oh, shit.
While not mentioning either by name during his delivery.
Hey, that's why you do it.
In response to an inquiry about his presidential intentions, Lincoln said, "The taste is in my mouth a little."
There's a little.
It's in my mouth a little. I got it. You taste that? You see that, Craig? You can get that down there.
Taste it. Come on.
That tastes fresh.
The Republican National Convention met in mid-May 1860 after the Democrats had forced to adjourn their convention in Charleston. Oh, well. With the Democrats in disarray and a sweep of the northern states possible, the Republicans felt confident going into their convention in Chicago. William Seward from New York, considered frontrunner,
Seward, man.
followed by Salmon Chase from Ohio, and then Missouri's Edward Bates. Lincoln from Illinois was lesser known and was not considered to even have a good chance against Seward.
Well, Seward had been governor and senator of New York and was an able politician with a Whig background. Also running were John Fremont, William Dayton, Cassius Clay, and Benjamin Wade, who might be able to win if the convention deadlocked. As the convention developed, however, it was revealed that frontrunners Seward, Chase, and Bates had each alienated factions of the Republican Party.
Oh,
Seward had been painted as a radical, and his speeches on slavery predicted inevitable conflict,
right.
which spooked moderate delegates.
Yeah.
He also was firmly opposed to nativism, which further weakened his position.
Ooh.
He had also been abandoned by his longtime friend and political ally Horace Greeley, who was publisher of their influential New York Tribune.
Oh.
Yeah, you got to have a big newspaper guy behind you.
Yeah,
man.
you lose that, you lose everything. Chase, he's a former Democrat, had alienated many of the former Whigs by his coalition with the Democrats in the late 1840s. And he's like, that was freaking 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
He had also opposed tariffs demanded by Pennsylvania and even had opposition from his own delegation from Ohio.
Oh, wow.
However, Chase's firm anti-slavery stance made him popular with the radical Republicans. But what he offered in policy, he lacked in charisma and political acumen. Yeah, can't have that. Gotta have charisma.
Meanwhile, the conservative Bates was an unlikely candidate, but found support from Horace Greeley, who saw any chance to defeat Seward, with whom he now had a bitter feud.
Uh-oh.
Bates outlined his positions on the extension of slavery into the territories and equal constitutional rights for all citizens, positions that alienated his supporters in the border states and Southern conservatives.
Yeah, you're going to have trouble everywhere.
And Southern conservatives. While German Americans in the party opposed Bates because of his past association with the Know-Nothings, into this mix, Abraham Lincoln comes rising from the political ashes.
Who fails to even say exactly what he opposes and what he doesn't.
That's not true. We know he opposes slavery and the extension of slavery.
That's it. Not the abolition, not the abolitionist of it. No.
Fine.
After the Cooper Union speech, Lincoln was in much demand for speaking engagements. As the convention approached, Lincoln did not campaign actively, as the office was expected to seek the man. Oh.
See, this is what Lincoln did early on in his career. Right. Whenever he was losing, he just gave it up anyways.
He did. So it did at the Illinois State Convention a week before the National Convention. Yep.
Meaning they seek the man. They wanted the man.
Young politician Richard Oglesby found several fence rails that Lincoln may have split as a youngster and paraded them into the convention with a banner that proclaimed Lincoln to be the rail candidate for president. Lincoln received a thunderous ovation, surpassing his and his political allies' expectations. Oh, wow.
So he's a man of hard work.
I guess.
Put in his time, working on the fields and putting up fences.
Yeah, sure.
Lincoln's campaign managers had printed and distributed thousands of fake convention admission tickets to Lincoln supporters to ensure and increase the crowd support. Oh, geez.
Oh, wow.
Even with such support from his home state, Lincoln faced a difficult task if he was to win the nomination.
You ain't kidding.
He set about ensuring that he was the second choice of most delegates, realizing that the first round of voting at the convention was unlikely to produce a clear winner. He engineered that the convention would happen in Chicago, which would be obviously friendly to Lincoln since he's an Illinois guy.
Right.
Look at this guy. I mean, if you want to do it, you got to play the political game.
Yeah. Well, Lincoln also made sure that the Illinois delegation would vote as a block for him. Lincoln did not attend the convention in person. And he left the task of delegate wrangling to several close friends. The first round voting predictably produced a lead for Seward, but not a majority. Lincoln in second place.
Oh, well.
Second round eliminated most of the minor contenders, with voters switching mostly to Seward or Lincoln. The convention remained deadlocked. Skillful political maneuvering by Lincoln's delegate wranglers convinced some delegates to abandon Seward in favor of Lincoln, but how many?
Lincoln's combination of a moderate stance on slavery, long support for economic issues, his Western origins, and strong oratory, he proved to be exactly what the delegates wanted in a president.
Damn right.
On the third ballot, May 18th, Lincoln secured the nomination overwhelmingly.
Look at that.
Senator Hannibal Hamlin from Maine was nominated for vice president, defeating Clay. Hamlin, he was surprised by his nomination, saying he was astonished and that he neither expected nor desired it.
Oh.
Which is even more crazy, yeah, because he was the first vice president. Johnson didn't even come in until the second election.
Right.
And within 2 months, he's president.
And this is what I like as well, because back then they voted for both.
Right. You frequently had
Republican,
members of either party.
Right. That was fantastic. Party platform promised not to interfere with slavery in the states, but oppose slavery in the territories. The platform promised tariffs protecting industry and workers, a Homestead Act granting free farmland in the West to settlers, and the funding of a transcontinental railroad.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, that's everything everybody ever wanted, besides the slavery stuff. There's no mention of Mormonism, which had been condemned in the party's 1856 platform. Yeah, and everybody was fleeing from Pennsylvania and
Chicago, and all that.
And there was no mention of the Fugitive Slave Act. There was no mention of the personal liberty laws or even the Dred Scott decision.
Stay away from all that.
While the Seward forces were disappointed at the nomination of a little-known Western upstart guy, they rallied behind Lincoln anyway. While abolitionists were angry at the selection of a moderate and had little faith in old Abe.
Well, moving on to the actual election, we had the Northern Democrat, and their candidates were Stephen Douglas, James Guthrie, who was former Treasury Secretary from Kentucky, Robert Mercer Taliaferro Hunter, Senator from Virginia, Joseph Lane, a Senator from Oregon, Daniel Dickinson, former Senator from New York, Andrew Johnson, the old Tennessee Howell Cobb, who was Treasury Secretary from Georgia, probably related to the other races. Well, at the Democratic National Convention held in Institute Hall, Charleston, South Carolina, April 1860, 50 Southern Democrats walked out over a platform dispute led by the extreme pro-slavery fire eater William Lowndes Yancey and the Alabama delegation Following them were the entire delegations of Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas. 3 of the 4 delegates from Arkansas, and one of the 3 from Delaware.
Oh, wow.
Damn, Democrats got some strife going on here, huh?
Holy shit. Douglas, a moderate on the slavery issue who favored popular sovereignty, was ahead on the first ballot, but was 56.5 votes short of securing the nomination.
Damn.
On the 57th ballot, with Douglas still ahead, but 51.5 votes, it's going down. The exhausted and desperate delegates agreed on the 3rd of May to cease voting and adjourn the convention.
Said we're not getting nowhere.
While some consider Horatio Seymour a compromise candidate for the National Democratic nomination at the reconvening convention in Baltimore, Seymour wrote a letter to the editor of his local newspaper declaring unreservedly that he was not a candidate for either spot on the ticket. I don't know what
He said, I don't want nothing to do with
I
this.
don't know what you guys are trying to do, but no. After 2 ballots, the 59th ballot overall, the remaining Democrats nominated Stephen A. Douglas from Illinois for president. It's the ballot of the Illinois, the fight in Illinois. The election would now pit Lincoln against his longtime political rival, whom Lincoln had lost to in the Illinois Senate race just 2 years earlier. That's a hell of a Cinderella story.
Well, the two candidates were from Illinois showed the importance of the West in the election. While Benjamin Fitzpatrick from Alabama was nominated for vice president, he refused the nomination.
Wow.
After the convention concluded with no vice presidential nominee, Douglas offered the vice presidential nomination to Herschel Johnson from Georgia, and he's like, "Yeah, damn right, I'm accepting."
Southern Democrat candidates: John C. Breckinridge, Vice President of the United States.
We know what he goes on to do.
Yep. Daniel S. Dickinson, former senator.
Damn, so he was in the northern. He said, "I'll try my luck with damn Jefferson." Oh, Jefferson Davis. Yeah.
Robert Mercer Taliaferro Hunter.
Damn, him again.
From Virginia. Joseph Lane, senator from Oregon.
Jeez.
Jefferson Davis, senator from Mississippi.
Yeah, those are the ones that walked out.
Right. The delegates who walked out of the convention. When the convention seated 2 replacement delegates on June 18th, they walked out again.
Yeah.
Or they boycotted the convention. Accompanied by nearly all other Southerner delegates and erstwhile convention chair Caleb Cushing, a New Englander and former member of Franklin Pierce's cabinet.
This larger group met immediately in Baltimore's Institute Hall with Cushing again presiding. They adopted the pro-slavery platform rejected at Charleston and nominated Vice President John Breckinridge for president and Senator Joseph Lane for vice president.
All right.
Yancey and some of the bolters, the guys that walked out,
right.
They almost entirely from the lower South met June 28th in Richmond, along with the South Carolina and Florida delegations that happened at a convention that affirmed the nominations of Breckinridge and Lane.
There we go. Started madness. Besides the Democratic parties in the southern states, the Breckinridge-Lane ticket was also supported by the Buchanan administration.
Oh.
Buchanan's own continued prestige in his home state of Pennsylvania ensured that Breckinridge be the principal Democratic candidate in that populous state. Breckinridge was the last sitting vice president nominated for president until Richard Nixon in 1960. Oh, shit.
Well, meanwhile, we got the Constitutional Union.
Oh, I like that.
Their candidates were John Bell, former senator from Tennessee, Sam Houston, which we know was like started Texas basically,
Right.
John Crittenden, senator from Kentucky, Edward Everett, former senator from Massachusetts, William Graham, former senator from North Carolina, and William Rives, who was a former senator from Virginia.
Okay.
Well, that party was formed by remnants of the now defunct Know Nothing and Whig parties. They're like, where do we go?
Right.
They were unwilling to join either the Republicans or the Democrats.
Right.
The new party's members hoped to stave off Southern secession by avoiding the slavery issue altogether.
Oh.
They met in the East Side District Courthouse of Baltimore and nominated John Bell from Tennessee for president and Governor Sam Houston of Texas on the second ballot. Edward Everett, he was nominated for vice president at the convention May 9th, 1 week before Lincoln was.
John Bell, he's a former Whig who had opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Lecompton Constitution. Edward Everett had been president of Harvard University and Secretary of State in the Millard Fillmore administration. Oh, so this guy got some...
Well, he's going for vice president, huh?
Well, the party platform advocated compromise to save the Union with the slogan, "The Union as it is and the Constitution as it is."
Okay.
They just didn't want change.
Right. Well, then we had the Liberty Union candidates. Garrett Smith, who was a former representative from New York. By 1860, a very little remained of the Liberty Party after most of its membership left to join the Free Soil Party in 1848. and nearly all of what remained of it joined the Republicans in 1854. The remaining party was also called the Radical Abolitionists. Oh, well, we know their guys.
Oh, wow.
A convention of 100 delegates was held in Convention Hall, Syracuse, New York, August 29, 1860. Delegates were in attendance from New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, and Massachusetts.
Oh.
Several of the delegates were women.
Look at that.
Geez. We know what this party
Fantastic.
is.
Garrett Smith, prominent abolitionist and 1848 presidential nominee of the original Liberty Party. He sent a letter in which he stated that his health had been so poor that he had not been able to be away from home since 1858. And you guys want this to be president? Nonetheless, he remained popular in the party because he had helped inspire some of John Brown's supporters at the raid on Harper's Ferry. Well, that's cool. In his letter, Smith donated $50 to pay for the printing of ballots in the various states.
All right. Well, there was quite a spirited contest between the friends of Garrett Smith and William Goodell in regard to the nomination for the presidency.
Oh.
In spite of his professed ill health, Garrett Smith was nominated for president, and Samuel McFarland from Pennsylvania was for VP.
Oh.
Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana, all slates of presidential electors pledged to Smith, and McFarland ran with the name of the Union Party.
Damn.
Okay, they received a total of 176 votes in the general election, which was 0.004% of the total.
Good job, guys. Let's go on to the People's Party. Who are these guys? Well, the People's Party is a loose association of the supporters of Governor Samuel Houston.
Dude, how is this guy on? How are these people on multiple tickets?
Right. April 20th, 1860, the party held what it termed a national convention to nominate Houston for president on the San Jacinto battlefield in Texas. Houston's supporters at the gathering did not nominate a vice president since they expected later gatherings to carry out that function. Later, mass meetings were held in northern cities, such as New York on the 30th of May, 1860, but they failed to even nominate a vice presidential candidate again. Houston, he never was even enthusiastic about running for president. Soon became convinced that he had no chance of winning. And he thought this guy had 176 votes. Well, I guess you don't know that yet.
Right.
He had no chance of winning, that his candidacy would only make it easier for the Republican candidate to win. He withdrew from the race on the 16th of August and urged the formation of a unified Union ticket in opposition to Lincoln.
Well, in their campaigning, Bell and Douglas both claimed that this union would not necessarily follow a Lincoln election.
Oh.
Nonetheless, loyal Army officers in Virginia, Kansas, and South Carolina warned Lincoln of military preparations to the contrary.
Oh.
Secessionists threw their support behind Breckinridge in an attempt to either to force the anti-Republican candidates to coordinate their electoral votes or to throw the election into the House of Representatives, where the selection of the president would be made by the representatives elected in 1858,
Wow.
which is before the Republican majorities in both House and Senate achieved in 1860 were seated.
Oh.
So they're like, well, you got to get it through the House because we got all Democrats there and we'll push it through for the guy.
Okay, here we go here. Mexican war hero Winfield Scott suggested to Lincoln that he assume the powers of commander-in-chief before inauguration. Whoa. However, historian Bruce Chadwick observes that Lincoln and his advisor ignored the widespread alarms and threats of secession as mere election trickery. Yeah, they're like, they're never going to do anything. Indeed, voting in the South was not as monolithic as the Electoral College map would make it seem. Economically, culturally, politically, the South was made up of three regions. States of the Upper South, also known as the Border South, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri. Unionist popular votes were scattered among Lincoln, Douglas, and Bell to form a majority in all four. So it's like...
In the four middle states, there was a Unionist majority divided between Douglas and Bell in Virginia and Tennessee. In North Carolina and Arkansas, the Unionists, which was Bell and Douglas, vote approached a majority.
Oh.
In three of the seven Deep South states, Unionists, Bell and Douglas, won divided majorities in Georgia and Louisiana and neared it in Alabama.
Wow.
Breckinridge, he convincingly carried only 4 of the 7 states of the Deep South, which was South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi, and Texas.
Right.
Isn't he from North Carolina, or he was from Pennsylvania, and he still didn't even carry that?
Wow.
The Deep South states had, well, that's not Deep South, I guess. The Deep South states had the largest enslaved populations and consequently the smallest enfranchised free white populations.
Oh, wow.
Right. That's why he won those.
Right. Among the slave states, 3 states with the highest voter turnouts voted the most one-sided. Texas, with 5% of the total wartime South's population, voted 75% Breckinridge. Kentucky, Missouri, with 1/4 of the total population, voted 73% pro-Union, Bell, Douglas, and Lincoln.
Oh, wow.
In comparison, the other 6 states of the Deep South, made up of 1/4 of the Confederate voting population, split 57% Breckinridge and 43% the other 2 pro-union candidate. So, I mean, everybody thought it was like 90-10 and blah. No, it's actually pretty close. 57-43 is kind of bit, but it's still pretty close.
More than what it would be like you would think it would be for the Deep South.
Right. The 4 states that were admitted to the Confederacy after Fort Sumter held almost half of its population, and they voted a narrow combined majority of 53% for the pro-union candidates. Holy shit.
And the 11 states that would later declare their secession from the Union and be controlled by Confederate armies, ballots for Lincoln were cast only in Virginia, where he received 1,929 votes, which was 1.15% of the total.
Makes sense.
Unsurprisingly, the vast majority of the votes Lincoln received were cast in border counties of what would soon become West Virginia,
Right.
which the future state accounted for 1,832 of the 1,929 votes. Wow.
Oh.
Lincoln received no votes at all in 121 of the state's at the time 145 counties, which included 31 of the 50 that would form West Virginia. Oh, wow. He received a single vote in 3 counties and received 10 or fewer votes in 9 of the 24 counties where he polled votes.
Lincoln's best results by far were in the 4 counties that
This is just the South, obviously.
Right. That comprised the state's northern panhandle, a region which had long felt alienated from Richmond, was economically and culturally linked to its neighbors Ohio and Pennsylvania. Yeah. And would become the key driver in a successful effort to form a separate state. Hancock County, Virginia's northernmost at the time, returned Lincoln's best result. Over 40% he polled there and finished in second place. Lincoln polled only 8 votes fewer than Breckinridge.
Of the 97 votes cast for Lincoln in the state's post-1863 boundaries, 93 were polled in 4 counties along with the Potomac River, and 4 were tallied in the coastal city of Portsmouth. One key difference between modern elections and those of the mid-19th century is that at the time, the state did not print and distribute ballots. In theory, any document containing a valid or at least non-excessive number names of citizens of a particular state, provided they were eligible to vote in electoral college within that state, might have been accepted as a valid presidential ballot. However, what this meant in practice was that a candidate's campaign was responsible for printing and distributing their own ballots.
Wow.
This service was typically done by supportive newspaper publishers. Well, that's fucked.
That don't seem very
Safe and secure, huh?
wow. Moreover, since voters did not choose the president directly, but rather presidential electors, the only way for a voter to meaningfully support a particular candidate for president was to cast a ballot for citizens of his state who would have pledged to vote for the candidates in the electoral college, which makes sense. In 10 southern slave states, no citizen would publicly pledge to vote for Abraham. So citizens had no legal means to vote for the Republican nominee.
Jeez.
No legal means. None at all.
Most of Virginia, no publisher would print ballots for Lincoln's pledge electors. While a citizen without access to a ballot for Lincoln could theoretically still have voted for him by means of a write-in, provided his state had electors pledged to Lincoln and the voter knew their identities.
Right.
Casting a ballot in favor of the Republican candidate in a strongly pro-slavery county would have incurred, at minimum, social ostracization.
Right.
On the other side, casting a vote for Breckinridge in a strongly abolitionist county ran the same risk.
Right. So you're like,
Obviously, so it's either, north or south. I mean, it's already north or south.
well, over with. In the 4 slave states that did not succeed, which was Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware, Lincoln came in 4th in every state except for Delaware. He finished 3rd. Within 15 slave states, Lincoln won only 2 counties out of 996. Missouri, St. Louis, and Gasconade counties. In 1856 election, the Republican candidate for president had received no votes at all in 12 of the 14 slave states with a popular vote.
Well, this election, held Tuesday, November 6, 1860, and was noteworthy for the exaggerated sectionalism and voter enthusiasm in a country that was soon to dissolve into civil war.
Yeah.
Voter turnout, 81.2%, the highest in American history up to that time, and the second highest overall, which exceeded only in the election of 1876. So it's still second overall ever. Since Andrew Jackson had one re-election in 1832, all 6 subsequent presidents had only won 1 term,
Wow.
While the last 4 of those had won with a popular vote under 51%, so there were some tight-ass races, too.
Oh, look at that.
You have a mirror or what?
Country didn't know where it wanted to go. I'm like, oh, shit. Lincoln won the electoral college with less than 40% of the popular vote. Wow. By carrying states above the Mason-Dixie line and North Ohio River. Plus the states of California.
Obviously, the North is the industrialized where all the population is.
Plus he got the newly states of California and Oregon.
Oh, wasn't Oregon he was fair to go to a little while, a few years before, because it was a Democratic stronghold?
Sure. Yeah. Unlike every preceding president-elect, Lincoln did not even carry even one slave state. He instead carried all 18 free states exclusively.
Well, hey, whatever it took to get the job done, I guess.
There were not even ballots distributed for Lincoln in 10 of the southern slave states: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas said no.
So then he would have won far greater.
Probably.
Put it that way.
Most likely.
Damn, 40% of the popular vote and still won, huh? All right. Oh, this withheld 61 potential electoral votes from Lincoln, right?
Right.
A fifth of what was the total of 303 available to other candidates. In a similar divide between North and South electors, Breckinridge carried 9 of the 10 slave states that withheld Lincoln from the ballot, with the exception being Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee said no, Breckinridge.
Lincoln was therefore the second president-elect to poll no votes in some states that had a popular vote. The first was John Quincy Adams, who polled no ballots in the popular votes of 2 states in the election of 1824.
Wow.
The only other election in which there were 4 major candidates, none of whom distributed ballots in every state.
Holy shit, how the hell did he win?
I would assume he was probably all northern shit too, man.
It also should be noted, prior to the introduction of the secret ballot in 1880s, the concept of ballot access did not even exist in the sense it does today. There was no standardized state-issued ballot for a candidate to appear on it. Instead, presidential ballots were printed and distributed by agents of the candidates, as we said before.
That's crazy.
Who organized slates of would-be electors publicly pledged to vote for a particular candidate. Yeah.
Right.
Since 1860, excluding reconstructed southern states in 1868 and 1872, there have been 2 occasions where a Republican presidential candidate failed to even poll votes in every state, while national Democratic candidates have failed to appear on all state ballots in 3 elections since the introduction of the secret ballot. Though in all 3, the Democratic candidate nonetheless won the presidency. But none of them were off the ballot, and in many states as Lincoln in 1860, though.
So what they're trying to say is Lincoln had a big-ass disadvantage, and he still won. Well, Lincoln won the second lowest share of the popular vote among all winning presidential candidates in U.S. history.
Wow.
Lincoln's share of the popular vote would likely have been even lower had there been a popular vote in South Carolina.
Oh.
Though, conversely, it would likely have been marginally higher had he been on the ballot in all of the southern states, right?
Right.
The Republican victory resulted from the concentration of votes in the free states, which together controlled a majority of the presidential electors.
Obviously. Yes. Lincoln's strategy was deliberately focused, in collaboration with Republican Party Chairman Thurlow Weed, on expanding on the states Fremont won 4 years ago. New York was critical with 35 electoral college votes, 11.5% of the total. Pennsylvania had 27, and Ohio had 23 as well. A candidate could collect 85 votes, whereas 152 were required to win. Looking pretty good there just for those 3. The Wide Awakes, young Republican men's organization, massively expanded their registered voter list, and although Lincoln was not even on the ballot in most southern states, population increases in the free states had far exceeded those seen in the slave states for many years before the election of 1860.
That made up the difference there.
Right. Hence, free states dominated in the electoral college.
Well, that Gasconade County, Missouri, they have voted Republican presidential candidate in every election from 1860 on, which, as of 2024, makes it the longest Republican winning streak in presidential elections in the nation.
Wow.
Man, look at you, Gasconade.
Cool.
The split in Democratic Party is sometimes held responsible for Lincoln's victory, obviously.
Right.
Even though Lincoln won the election with less than 40% of the popular vote, as much of the anti-Republican vote was wasted in southern states in which no ballots for Lincoln were circulated.
Right, yes. We'll say that a million times.
Right. In the states of New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, where anti-Lincoln votes were combined into fusion tickets, Lincoln still won 2 and split New Jersey. Despite this, a shift of 25,000 votes to the fusion ticket in New York would have left Lincoln with 145 electoral votes, 7 votes short of winning the college, and force a contingent election of the House of Representatives.
Senior Duck.
Of the 5 states that Lincoln failed to carry despite polling votes, he received 20% of the vote in only 1, which was Delaware, and 10% of the vote in only 1 more, which was Missouri.
Damn, he only got 20% of the vote in Delaware?
Delaware is a slave state.
Like Lincoln, Breckinridge and Bell won no electoral votes outside of their respective sections.
Of course.
Bell retired to his family business, quietly supporting his state's succession. Breckinridge served as a Confederate general, as we all know. He finished second in electoral college with 72 votes, carrying 11 of 15 slave states, including South Carolina, whose electors were chosen by a state legislator and not even a popular vote.
Oh, jeez.
Breckinridge stood at a distant third in national popular vote at 18%, but accrued 50 to 75% in the first 7 states that would form the Confederate States of America. Highly recognized dude there, huh?
He took 9 of the 11 states that eventually joined, plus the border slave states of Delaware and Maryland.
Makes sense.
Losing only Virginia and Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
Breckinridge received very little support in the free states, showing some strength in only California, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut.
They probably just liked his name.
Right.
I don't know.
Bell, he carried 3 slave states, which were Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia. And then he lost Maryland by only 722 votes.
Well, that's a lot.
Nevertheless, he finished a remarkable second in all slave states won by Breckinridge or Douglas.
Well, look at that.
Look at that.
Good for him. He also won 45 to 47% in Maryland, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And canvassed respectively with 36 to 40% in Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida. That's pretty cool. Bell himself had hoped that he would take over the former support of the extinct Whig Party in free states. But the majority of this support went to Lincoln. Thus, except for running May Everett's home state of Massachusetts and California, Bell received even less support in the free states than Breckinridge, and consequently came in last place in the national vote at 12.6%.
Well, Douglas, he was the only candidate who won electoral votes in both slave and free states.
Look at that.
Which he won in free New Jersey and slave state Missouri.
Fantastic.
His support was the most widespread geographically. He finished second behind Lincoln in the popular vote with 29.5%, but last in the Electoral College.
Oh, wow.
His 12 electoral votes are the lowest for a Democrat in history. Douglas attained a 28 to 47% share in the states of the Mid-Atlantic, Midwest, and Trans-Mississippi West, but slipped to 19 to 39% in New England. Outside his regional section, Douglas took 15 to 17% of the popular vote total in the slave states of Kentucky, Alabama, and Louisiana, then 10% or less in the 9 remaining states.
Okay.
Douglas and his Norfolk Doctrine, reiterated in North Carolina, promised to keep the Union together by coercion if states proceeded to secede. The popular vote for Lincoln and Douglas combined was 69.1% of the turnout.
Oh, beautiful.
So people didn't want to secede, apparently.
Well, all right. That wasn't the plan. The 1816 Republican ticket was his first successful national ticket that did not feature a Southerner. And the election marked the end of Southern political dominance in the United States of America.
All for a Southerner to become president after Lincoln got assassinated.
Right. Between 1879 and 1860, Southerners had been president for 2/3 of the era and held the offices of Speaker of the House, President pro tempore of the Senate, during much of that time. Moreover, since 1791, Southerners had comprised a majority of the Supreme Court as well.
Yep. Well, we all know Lincoln's victory and imminent inauguration as president was the immediate cause for declarations of secession by 7 southern states: South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, from December to February.
Right.
They then formed the Confederate States of America. 9th of February, 1861, Jefferson Davis was elected that first president.
Damn, that quick, dude.
Several other states also considered declaring secession at this time: Missouri, Arkansas, Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina. They all had referendums, but they failed.
Right.
But they would go.
Yeah, they would. All of the secessionist activity was motivated by fear for the institution of slavery in the South. If the president opposed slavery, it might collapse. There were fears that the abolitionist agents would infiltrate the South and foment slave insurrections. The noted secessionist William Lowndes Yancey, speaking at New York's Cooper's Institute, 1860 in October, asserted that the abolitionists in power, emissaries will percolate between master and slave as water between the crevices of rocks underground. Wow. They will be found everywhere with strychnine to put in our wells. Strychnine?
Sure.
Less radical Southerners thought that with Northern anti-slavery dominance of the federal government, slavery would eventually be abolished, regardless of present constitutional limits. They're like, it's going to end sooner or later. You got to go.
Well, Bertram Wyatt Brown argues that secessionists desired independence as necessary for their honor. They could no longer tolerate Northern state attitudes that regarded slave ownership as a great sin, and Northern politicians who insisted on stopping the spread of slavery.
Uh-oh.
Another block of Southerners resented Northern criticism of slavery and restrictions on slavery, but opposed secession as dangerous and unnecessary. However, the conditional Unionists also hoped that when faced with secession, Northerners would stifle anti-slavery rhetoric and accept pro-slavery rules for the territories.
They won't, though, guys. They're not backing down, and we won't back down. That's what Abe Lincoln's saying.
Right.
It was that group that prevented immediate succession in Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas when Lincoln took office on the 4th of March, 1861. He took no action against the secessionists in the 7 Confederate states, but also declared that secession had no legal validity and refused to surrender federal property in those states. They do have legal, because it says right in the Constitution.
Nope, got to be voted on.
It does have to be voted on. He also reiterated his opposition to slavery anywhere in the territories. Preparing to form an army on the 6th of March, 1861, Confederate President Davis called for 100,000 volunteers to serve for 12 months.
The political standoff continued until mid-April when Davis ordered Confederate troops to go ahead and capture Fort Sumter.
Uh-oh.
Lincoln, he then called for troops to put down the rebellion, which wiped out the possibility that the crisis could be resolved by compromise.
Right.
Nearly all conditional unionists joined the secessionists, including, for example, presidential candidate John Bell of the Constitutional Union Party, whose home state of Tennessee was the last to secede.
Ooh.
The Virginia Convention and the reconvened Arkansas Convention both declared secession, as did the legislatures of Tennessee, North Carolina. All 4 states then joined the Confederacy.
Look at that shit. It was like crazy instant. Missouri stayed in the U.S., but had an unrecognized dual government.
We all know that. Some shit happened in Missouri during
Right.
Missouri during the war.
After the Civil War begun, Douglas then threw his support behind Lincoln and undertook a tour to bolster up support for the Union, making visits to Virginia, Ohio, and Illinois. Douglas declared, "There are no neutrals, only patriots and traitors." And Missouri's like, "What?"
Right.
Kentucky's like, "What?" Or was it Tennessee?
West Virginia's like, what?
Right. Well, West
Delaware's like, what?
However, 3 months after Lincoln's inauguration, Douglas contracted,
That doggone typhoid fever, man. I swear.
Douglas got typhoid fever and died in Chicago on the 3rd of June, 1861. Damn. En route to his inauguration by train, Lincoln addressed crowds and legislators across the North. The president-elect then evaded possible assassins in Baltimore, who were uncovered by Lincoln's head of security, Allen Pinkerton.
All the old Pinkertons.
On February 23rd, 1861, he arrived in disguise in Washington, D.C., which was placed under substantial military guard. Wow, that kind of sounds like crazy shit going on there, huh?
Yeah, well, Lincoln directed his inaugural address to the South, proclaiming once again that he had no intention or inclination to abolish slavery in the southern states. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be in danger.
All right, I just think
There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you. I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declare that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so.
Wow.
He said that on his first inaugural address.
Makes sense. It's not a surprise. Some people it is. They don't know
Nobody believed
history.
him.
Right. The president ended his address with an appeal to the people of the South. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone, are all over this broad land. Will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. They're like, bullshit! Like, whoa! Eat crow! Well, I don't know. Did I say that? The failure of the Peace Conference of 1861
Which we most likely will have an episode all about that.
Right. It signaled that legislative compromise was impossible.
Yeah, there's no talking it out, guys.
By March of 1861, no leaders of the insurrection had proposed rejoining the Union on any terms. Meanwhile, Lincoln and the Republican leadership agreed that the dismantling of the Union could not be tolerated.
Just as the war ended, we'll fast forward here a little bit, but he did say both parties deprecated war, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came.
Damn.
And that is where we leave off episode 2 before we get in, second part of Abraham Lincoln before we get into the third part, which is going to cover his presidency, which obviously only lasts through the war. And much of that will be talking about stuff that happened during the war, obviously, because what else is he doing?
Right.
And, so we'll take a look at his presidency, plus we'll obviously have the same type of lead up that we just did to this election, but for the 1864 election, before we end it with our fourth part on Abraham Lincoln, which is obviously the assassination. So shit's getting hot. Oh, damn, dude. Lincoln.
Fucking Lincoln.
He kind of had like one of the biggest what if presidencies ever? You know, what would he have done if there wasn't a war? What would have happened?
Right.
Crazy. Guess we'll never know.
Never know.
Never know. But that's it. We're looking at about an hour, probably. That's not bad. A little less, 20 minutes less than part one. So there you go. It's part two. Back to part three. Farting and parting. Doing all that sorts of stuff on Civil War behind the battles. We'll see you next week. We are the Minutes Man.
Bang, bang.